for Jimmy Whatley coming in today. Jimmy, I want to talk today about the subject people don't talk about, the wills, insurance, final estate planning. Why don't people want to talk about this, and what do we need to know about this?
Start with, people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to deal with it. They say that's going to be done later, tomorrow, mañana. That's the word that comes into that. But it's really critical. First thing is, people say, I don't want to have a will. Truth is, you've got a will. If you are alive, you've got a will. If you got any assets, you've got a will. It just so happens that the state of Georgia controls what that will says, and you don't have any say into it after you're gone. They say, we're going to do it this way, and this is how it's going to happen. I had a brother-in-law that was facing death, and he didn't have a will. And he said, I can't decide what to do with it. I said, well, let me tell you what the state has decided. I went through what the state was going to do. And he had a daughter that was addicted to drugs. And I said, do you want to kill that daughter? He looked at me and I said, that's right. When you pass away, this percentage of your estate is going to go directly to her. And if you don't think that much money at one time is not going to kill your daughter, you're wrong. I got his attention. And then he said, what do I do? And I said, well, we'll have to get some really good advice. And I talked to 3 different lawyers, experts, and they came up with a suggestion. And it involved a complicated situation, but it could solve the problem by putting his assets into a trust controlled by some of his children who did have some common sense. And that worked out really well. Matter of fact, he's been dead about 10 years now, and it's worked really well. His widow is being taken care of. The assets are growing. So the state's plan, state of Alabama, was wrong. His assessment, and came back, put a will in place. It really worked out. Matter of fact, the plan we were given, I met with him, and the lawyer, his local lawyer, had to write it. I had explained it to him 3 times before he understood it. He'd never thought of a will in that right. So you have to understand each person's needs, but the first thing you have to do is understand there is a need for you to have a will that you decide yourself, not the state of Georgia or the state of Alabama deciding it.
Well, let's talk about what would the state do. So if you do nothing, this is what's going to happen.
A certain percent goes to the spouse, a certain percent goes to the children, and it's all you get to pay, and depends on what state it's in. 7% of the value of your estate goes to an administrator, and that goes right off the top, and he gets to decide when to sell it, how to sell it. Do you sell that land to kinfolks, or do you sell it to the open market? It's a pretty complex thing.
So you lose a lot of control then.
You lose all the control, and you give up 7% at least right off the top.
So making a will, saves you 7% of your total value of assets, plus the control of, you work all of your life,
That's
you
right.
save all of your money, you do all of your due diligence. Why would you not do a will to save that, preserve that?
People that don't have wills are scared. I don't understand the will, so I don't want to deal with it. Or they're saying, I don't have anything that's worth fooling with. The truth of the matter is, if you have a joint checking account, you're okay. Your wife or your husband can still use that joint account. But if you've got funds in your name over here, that whole estate's got to go through the probate before your spouse or your children can get access to those funds in the bank.
Well, I know that to be true. You're talking about because one spouse might work at one company and have a 401k, and then another spouse works at a different company and has a 401k or something. So they might not have each other's names on those accounts.
That's correct. All of those things are involved in it. In order to get access to those funds, you got to go through the probate and get a will probated, or you've got to have jointly signed up to start with.
Which basically takes more time.
It does. It does.
So what would be kind of the first step of man and woman, spouse, getting involved in a will? You said that you went to 3 different lawyers to get the best plan for what would be the course of action for your brother?
I did, and lawyers don't think outside the box very much. His particular case was outside the box. but he was still alive and he was capable of thinking, and we came up with a plan. When Ann and I got married 50 years ago, this year, as a matter of fact,
Congratulations.
we got us a will because it's simple. You can, early on like that, you get to decide immediately this, Ann gets this, she gets that, this goes this way. If you have children, then you can put in there, this is how I want my children handled. It's going to happen to the resources that go in that direction. If Ann or I got remarried, what would you do with that part of it? How would you guard those? There are simple ways to deal with it that clarify the air. It moves it all out of the way. You hadn't got to worry about it. You just go right ahead and say, this is how we want to deal with it. And it helps a marriage because people know he loves me enough that the assets are coming to me. It's amazing how that transfers trust to a partner.
So you could go to LegalZoom and you could get a will. You could download a will and fill that out yourself. Would you recommend, at what point would you do it yourself, or what point would you go to a lawyer and pay for that?
Once you start having some assets other than life insurance, which you can deal with directly outside of the estate, or once you got a business, or once you got children involved in it, then I'd go get a lawyer. It's not that expensive to get one handled correctly for your state, your county, and then you've got somebody you can go talk to. That's a key thing. A good lawyer, a good estate planner fits.
How much would it be for you to go? Would it be 500 to 1,000, or?
It depends on how complex it is, but you can depend on spending 500 to 1,000 to start with, and then you can spend 10 to 20 if you really got a complex setting up trusts and things like that. It can get expensive, but you got to do it. And the other thing I would say to you is, before you go into that, have a financial plan put in place. Get all of your assets listed, all of your insurance, everything down on a piece of paper. If you want to sit down with a professional, that'd be the good thing to do, to get it so you can look at what happens to my spouse. I've got this much insurance, I've got this many assets here, my 401k, all of those things, and something happens to me in 2 years or 20 years, what are the resources going to be available for her? Does she have to work? Does she have to do this? How does that fit? What about my kids in their college? You get all of those in mind, then you'll know how you want to set up your will.
Well, you seem to be knocking at the door of the next subject is life insurance. So why don't we just go ahead and
knocking at the door. Them insurance folks will come see you, won't they?
So basically a will is, dividing up and thinking about the assets that you already have right now currently and what you will have in the future, the next 5 to 10, 20 years. And you'll have to adjust that will as it goes up. But now you're saying, you're talking about life insurance, the difference between maybe term life and whole life, and why you would need that extra step of protection. So will is the first thing, life insurance is the second step.
Let's talk about life insurance.
Let's talk.
Life insurance is something that everybody needs. They don't need as much at any one time sometimes, but you got to stop and look at yourself. And you go see an insurance salesman, he's going to try to sell you the thing that minimizes your total protection and maximizes their perception of your investment. In other words, they're saying, you are dumb and you cannot invest wisely, so you give me $100 and I'll take 10 of that and buy insurance for you, and I'll take 90 and invest it. Oh, and by that 90, I'll probably put 10 or 15 in my pocket. And they, trust me, if you cannot invest any other way, then do it that way. But if you'll take, over that same period of time, buy term insurance, you'll buy what you need, not what you can't afford. It's a lot cheaper. But then take the difference and invest it yourself. And I suggest just taking it in a 401k or in an IRA. Put it in there for the long haul. And if you've maxed out those, then just get your simple fund set up with a broker and start buying stock. Say, I'm going to send you $500 a month. And you'd be surprised what will be there in 20 years. Because if you invest in the stock market, over a 10-year period, you'll average 9 to 10% return. If you invest in an interest rate or go to the bank, you'll average about 3%. And if you put it in bonds, you'll average about 5%. So,
and if you do it for whole life, you're saying you get 2 to 3 years.
yeah, you don't really do that well, because you're comparing. When I die, I get my life insurance, which is if you buy term, that's just that $100,000 worth goes in your pocket, or if you have whole life, that 100's there. But then you have some residual that comes from whole life that they have invested for you, and that's generally a third of what you would end up with if you had invested it straight out, paying somebody a commission of very little. Just put it in a stock fund and keep popping it in every month. Market's going to go up, market's going to go down. Over a 10-year period in the last 50, it's always gone up. So I'm a stock market investor of the difference. I'm a buy term, but get you longer term as you can. Understand what your needs are. If you've got 3 kids and they're 3, 5, and 7, look at what their needs are going to be if something happened to you over that period of time. And that means you may need $1 million, $1.5 million of term insurance until they get out of college. Then your needs go way down. Your wife's needs go way down. And you got to look at what she would need. Well, does she have a professional degree? Can she go teach? Can she do this? What's her needs going to be? And if you leave her enough money, you won't have to worry about it because somebody will come marry her, see?
So just to wrap this up, you've got term life, and it's so expensive because they take a large portion of that.
No, whole life.
Whole life. They take a large portion of that payment and they invest it for you. And then
they put a fair amount in their pocket, too.
And they put a fair amount in there. But that's the carrot stick, because I know they always say, well, if you do whole life, we're going to give you all this money back.
Yeah,
right. It's kind of like the taxes. Oh, pay the government, and we're going to give you all this money back before April 15th, well, no, you took all this money and more, and now I'm just getting a little bit back. So that's kind of the same thing with whole life is you give them lots of money, they give you back a portion. Then you have term life, and it's basically right exactly what you need.
You're buying protection. To me, life insurance is protection. Something happens to me, I die, I would like for Ann to have this kind of protection in place. I bought a 20-year term policy 17 years ago. And when I get to be 75, that term policy runs out, and that's okay. The needs that we have today aren't what they were 20 years ago when we bought the policy. So I'm okay with that. I bought it, got a good price on it. Today, I could not afford to buy that much term insurance again for another 5 years because I'm 73 now, and they look at me like, Jimmy, you may die pretty soon. And, they may be right. I'm getting close to getting where I'm going to pass on. So they want me to pay for the risk. But for the first 17 years, they've got that money, they've invested it. And if I don't die by the time I'm 75, they're the winners. And I'm a winner too because I get to live to be 75.
So basically, if you've got somebody between 20 and 30 and they just got married, they got into their house at $80,000, $100,000, $150,000 house, no kids, she works, he works, how much life insurance should they get to cover? I mean, just systematically thinking, where's the security come in? Would you say get life insurance to cover the house? Again, she's working. Kind of break that concept down.
Everybody's different. What do you want your spouse to do? If something happened I'd look at this in terms of kids and no kids, professional and not professional. If my wife she has a college degree, she could go to work. We factored that into that down the road. She didn't have to work, so we didn't ask her to go work except the first 5 years she worked while we were married. Everybody's different. I'm not as enthused about insurance to pay off a house because right now, if you're going to invest money, you can borrow longer-term money at a cheaper rate on a house than you can any way else. So look at it in that mode. So I would take What's it going to take to bear me? What's it going to take to keep a lifestyle for my spouse up over a 10, 15-year period if she continues to work? And that's where I would put the money. Now, you could take that money and pay off a house if you wanted to, but the reality is paying off a house at a 3.5% 20-year term, 20-year policy, that doesn't make as much sense to me as paying off credit card debt.
And if you think about it this way, you said that the stock market, you can make 10% on average.
On average.
And so if you're paying off the house, you make a 3% because basically that's that interest rate. I mean, basically up to 5%.
That's what you make.
So you could almost double your money by putting it into the stock market instead of paying off the house.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And last year, my stock fund made 28%. That's not bad.
Not bad at all.
Not bad at all. You know, I'm tickled with that. And this year it may average 5, but you look at it over a 10-year period, almost any 10-year period, including 08 when it tanked, you include those, lo and behold, you get around 9 to 10% on average.
Well, I think a lot of times, especially for business people, we kind of have this idea of, I can't wait till this is paid off because then my life is going to be so much better. You know, as soon as I get my house paid off, I'll have all of this money. As soon as I get my business building paid off, I'll have all of this money. For whatever reason, we really have this pay it off mentality.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody all the time, I'm like, but think about the loss of having it paid off. And I know there's a lot of people out there like Dave Ramsey. He says pay it off first.
He does. He gets paid more than I do, by the way.
He does. He's got a bigger house than me for sure. But and that's one system, and it's all right for people. And that's what we're just saying is what works best for you. Paying off your house at 4%. Or putting your money into the stock market or doing other things. Back to life insurance. So, 20 to 30, so you probably wouldn't get a $250,000 policy from 20 to 30 for your wife who can work and stuff like that. But then once you kind of get to 30 to 40, 45 to 50, somewhere in this range where you have kids, you have college payments.
Got to go up.
You got to go up, right?
Got to go up.
Because you got to have more security for them.
I go back to the first thing I said is get you a financial plan. Get you a financial planner to help you understand what your needs are. Look at your assets, your income, your expenses over that period of time. And then you say to them, okay, if Jimmy dies this year, what will it look like there? And he can show you that. That computer does it just like that. And you can say, I need $500,000 or I need $1 million too. Whatever it is, everybody's lifestyle, everybody's expenses are different. I like to talk about the guy, there were 2 neurosurgeons, and both of them made $700,000 a year. One of them was stone broke. One of them was a multi-millionaire. One of them just spent money right and left, new cars everywhere, and the other one invested. Everybody has different needs. If you're the guy that runs broke on $700,000 a year, then ain't no telling how much insurance you need. You just got to understand each person individually.
All right, so now let's move on to estate planning. Do you know anything about that? Do you have a dollar that you need estate planned?
Estate planning is critical, and it's tied in with wills. You right now, if your net worth is over about $11 million when you die, then Uncle Sam's going to go on getting a significant portion of that. But if you're under that today, you don't have to pay any estate taxes. So part of what I look at is not so much saving taxes as it is being sure that my estate, my assets, are dealt with the way I wanted them to. I had some land in Alabama that was jointly owned by siblings, and it was convoluted. It had personalities involved. It had those things, and I chose, while I was still alive, had relationship with my siblings, and we didn't get down to the great-grandchildren. I chose to settle that issue, to buy some folks out, to deal with that, and to put in the assets something that my wife and children could deal with, which is a check. This is an investment here that's paying this much, and you can get out of it. You can go here, you can do that. But when you got family-owned land with personalities, It's not easy to get in and out of those kind of things. And it's going to make people upset. It's going to do this. So I chose to deal with that hard thing. And I encourage folks listening out there, look at your asset base and say, what is going to be easy to move forward? What can roll into the next generation? What do I need to deal with now? How can I put it in a form that'll go in the next generation well?
So basically that land is producing, harvesting every year, and they're getting residual income for that harvest. Is that kind of, because you said basically they're going to be getting a check off it, but they don't have to do the management or stuff like that. Is that
I took it and sold it and put it in a 1031 exchange that set up to return a significant portion of money on a yearly basis. And so it doesn't require them to make cash payments, doesn't require them to manage anybody, doesn't require them to be liable for any debt on the asset. All they got to do is cash the check. So, I mean,
you've got multiple businesses, and
I'm afraid so.
You have properties, you have businesses, you have assets, you have stock market. Your wife did all of that, though, right? She organized and planned it all, and she pays all the bills.
No, Ann is not inclined in that direction. But what I do is I sit down with her at least once a year, and I look at each business, and I give her my assessment of where we are, what we got invested, what the strategy is, who's actually running it for us, what are the pivotal points. And I say, if something happens to me, this is what I would suggest you do with this particular business. You take this person, set them aside, and this is how you assess a business. What's the value of it? And you sell it to that person. Let them pay you overtime because I trust this person, and that gets you the cash out with a profit stream in the future. Do this one a different way. This one a different way. This one, you leave it alone. It's going to make money every year. Just leave it alone. Don't worry about it. It's something that's in a LLC, LLLP. All you got to do is, if you want to give it to the kids early, just give them some of it early. But when you pass away, that long-term capital gain will go away because of the stepped-up basis with passing.
And you learn all of these things from your accounts, from your lawyers, and setting everything up. But it almost sounds like you communicate, one, with your partners in the businesses you have and what you're going to have done, and then also with Ann, what she should do for these things. Instead of having a lawyer manage all these things, you're not putting everything in a trust. How'd you make that decision between the two?
I've run into very few lawyers that want to manage people the way I want to do. To lawyers, it's black and white. To me, it's relationship driven. And I try to keep Ann in the loop of what's happening, who's doing this. And I would rather, I'm investing in businesses with young men that I trust, that I want to help. And so I don't want to squash them. I don't want Ann to say, okay, I'm pulling out. And you got to look at both sides of the picture. And so I've set it up in that way. I've got it all set in an LLLP, and I've given Ann the ownership, and she'll get, something happens to me, it'll step up, some more come to her. And when she passes away, even that 1031 exchange, the $150,000 liability I had on it, taxes, it goes away. Boom, it's gone. The kids be able to pick that up. So that you got to understand the tax. I read a book one time that said, the people that understand the tax implications are the ones that make the best decisions. I have found that when you can save money Uncle Sam would normally get, that's found money. That's money that you ought to be proud to get. Don't give Uncle Sam money to squander away. You put the money where you can best use it. Don't break the law, don't do anything, but there are ways to manage that financial asset that minimizes taxes and maximizes your return.
Now, you spend a lot of time talking to Ann. Do you ever spend time talking to your son and daughter about what they should anticipate and expect and stuff like that? What are you going over with them?
Well, before I disposed of the land assets there, I said, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to move back there? Is this something you want to get into? And both of them, Wesley lives in New York City, and he's happy. He is. I hadn't lost anything in New York City except my son. He loved New York City. He doesn't. he's up there and he bought 300 square foot for over $300,000. I mean, he lives in it. He thinks he's died and gone to heaven. He's got his own place up there.
Right. So his toilet and his kitchen are in the same room.
Boy, I'm telling you, he's got a wall up, but it ain't big. And Wendy and her family are in the ministry in Dadeville, Alabama, and they don't want to. They can't move their ministry there. So we communicated all of what we're doing, and both of them said, "Dad, you do what's best for you and Mom." But I want him to understand this is the way we're moving. This is how it's going. It's going to be easy when the last of us passes away. Think about your kids. Give them something they can use, not a problem.
So you actually, in consideration of what you're going to do with the will and selling companies and the properties and getting the residual income, have talked to your kids about what they would like to
Sure.
be involved. Either way, would you like this land or would you not like this land? Would you like this income off this stock or would you not like this? You've actually talked to them
Sure.
about their percentage and yeah.
And we've got land it belongs to Ann's family, and it's family land as well. And nobody can make up their mind, and I'm not forcing that. It's sitting surrounded by family folks, and if something goes with us, then it'll be the kids will do something with it. They'll probably sell it, but Ann's not ready to decide that point, so I don't push it.
So there's always something to think about. I love the consideration because a lot of times, parents, some will have this kind of hidden, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And maybe it's because they're not ready to sit down with the kids and talk to them. Maybe they're a little fearful of the reaction or, will they be able to handle or manage it? I mean, have you kind of thought about that too? Like, I don't want to give my kids $1 million straight up cash, in consideration. Maybe they need to have it over a longer haul. And then I'm going to bring in this last thought. What about the grandkids? Have you considered, did you divide up some of your assets for them personally? So the parents get some, grandkids get some?
We have put funding into a scholarship program over there for them, and that helps them get to go to college. We'll do things that maybe Wendy and Francois couldn't afford. We try to take them on vacations and things, but they're kids. If you take care of their college, be sure their health and everything's going in well. I don't want I want the kids to be kids. I don't want to try to give them a special anything. I want them to enjoy life and go at it in that fashion. I really do.
Excellent. One of the other things, just to highlight, you talked last time about taxes and giving, kind of that scenario, forward thinking on how you contribute to the community through your giving. Can you kind of just touch on that a little bit?
Well, the scripture that kind of drives that is, unto whom much is given, much is expected in return. And part of what we try to do is to give over and above back into God's kingdom, to the church, tithe and offerings, and God's blessed us, so we try to do that. We try to invest. Again, I try to invest in ministries that I understand the heart of, and I know what they're doing. I watch them. I see that they're using the money wisely, and we try to pour into that with guidance, words, encouragement. I've served on a number of boards, and I try to help them understand the importance of planning, of having a budget, of having measurable entities that you can know whether you've been successful, and being good stewards of God's money. Those are things I try to do. I use a charitable fund every other year because for some strange reason our government has decided that they'll give you an advantage if you go to the charitable fund, put a bunch of money in one year, and don't give any the next year. You give it out of a charitable fund. That's a little more complex math, but it works and saves you about 15% of your, again. And that's just another tax. They give it to you, I take it, okay? So that's kind of where I go from.
Because basically some people might not have the family, extended family or stuff like that. I mean, like even Bill Gates talks about he's going to give more towards charities and stuff like that than, have you kind of also considered in your passing that you're going to give to charities also, or how's that?
What I have not done is tied Ann's hands or the kids' hands. I would hope that there'd be some things that would show up in going forward. Last night I went to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes dinner, and Tim Tebow was speaking, and they recognized 6 outstanding kids from schools around here. And the Rusty Griffin Foundation gave them $500 check, each one of them a scholarship. And that's something started. Rusty passed away in November. He's a great friend of mine. I learned a lot from him. But there again, things are being passed on. I wouldn't be opposed to Ann and the kids doing something like that. But that's not me setting it up. It's them setting it up with the current needs, because I don't know what the future holds. I know who holds the future, but I don't know who holds the future. I don't know. So I'd rather not tie their hands in that endeavor.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming in and talking today. Any final words to share?
You brought up this distribution of funding prior to death. It reminded me of the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son. In old times, he went to his father and said, "I want my share." He was the younger son. And the way they divided it up was 2/3 to the old boy and 1/3 to the young boy. And he went and squandered his, and when he came back, the father ran to him, fell on him, kissed him, gave him the robe and the ring and a feast. And in reality, I try to give kids and folks as much of what I can give them that they can take at one time. It's just like a bucket. The bucket sometimes is represented the life of a kid or an adult. You can just pour so much water in that bucket unless you grow the bucket. So you get the bucket to grow a little bit, you can pour a little more in it. But I try to keep buckets as full as I can without overflowing those buckets in child or in a grandchild's life. Did you understand that, Ben?
I got it. My kids are buckets.
Yeah, well, think about it. They're growing, and they're buckets.
They are.
And they'll take all you'll give them.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you are looking for somebody to help you in term life insurance, you can go to Liberty Mutual. You can go into the description down below, and you can click on Liberty Mutual, and they will organize a quote for you. Until next time.